Hey guys, Moms Against Medical Bullying. Um, so I made a video and talked about like my local county school in my area. I read their, what they're going to be doing for the kids this year, and as of right now, they were not trying to require suffocation devices. They were recommended, but I got this from Chris Weiss's page, so that the governor is trying to get it so that kids have to wear suffocation devices in school. See, once they got us, once they captivated us, they don't want to let go. And this is what people, right, didn't understand last year when they said, oh, just 2 weeks, like just do this, just do this, just do that. Like they actually thought like it was going to end when the liars said it was going to. And now like they're still saying the same BS over and over again. So, they didn't get like that when you give people this kind of power, like they don't give it back to you. So it says Movin's Andy Bashar in his official capacity as governor, blah blah blah, and the cabinet for health and services, Dr. Stephen Stack, blah, in his official capacity as a commissioner for public health, respectfully request that the court grant them leave to file the attached notice of supplemental authority to provide the court with Executive Order 2021585 that requires suffocation devices be worn indoors in Kentucky schools and child care settings with certain exemptions as set forth in the order, in further support of Movin's renewed motion for interlocutory relief under CR 6509, which is now fully briefed. So Chris Weiss followed up with a response to the governor's motion to do this. So yeah, this is all from his page, obviously. I give him the glory. This is not anything that no one else can look up, but I just wanted to share it. Okay, so let's read Chris's response here. So he says, as the chief executive officer in the Commonwealth, one would think the governor would have a particularly strong respect for the rule of law. However, judging by his latest motion, one could be forgiven for coming to the opposite conclusion. There was a trial in this case. The unrebutted expert evidence in that trial proved that suffocation mandates, I'll just say that, partly cloth suffocation devices versus N95 suffocation devices or other actual PPE are wholly effective. Oh, excuse me. I said wholly effective, right? Somebody may say, oh, a Freudian slip. They're wholly ineffective. The governor had every opportunity to prove otherwise, including through the testimony of his own witness, Dr. Stephen Stack. Yet plaintiff's expert opinion evidence remains unrebutted. Trial courts are particularly appropriate venues to sort out the validity of competing expert opinions, and more recent scientific conclusions are not, by virtue of their recency, inaccurate. State versus O'Kelly. Novelty does not imply invalidity, because every scientific theory must at some point be new. Perhaps the most famous example of a court rejecting a valid yet novel scientific theory is the trial of Galileo, where the scientist was convicted of heresy for asserting that the earth revolves around the sun. This is so funny. See generally Maurice A. I'm not going to say that last name, the Galileo Affair documentary. So that's really funny that was mentioned for all my stable earthers out there, isn't it? Wow. I love when they mention that stuff. If anything, this past year has aptly demonstrated the evolving nature of scientific proof, where the scientific community's understanding of a novel what's another word I can say? Novel invisible enemy, from implementation of mRNA shots that were unknown to our understanding of the invisible enemy and its behavior and characteristics has continued to evolve. Again, the governor had the unfettered opportunity to offer the latest scientific proof as regards to this invisible enemy and the best path for the public to avoid the invisible enemy from attacking other people. However, factual findings here, founded upon unrebutted, reliable scientific opinion testimony and based upon peer-reviewed studies, conclusively demonstrate the inefficacy of suffocation devices of the very kind the governor now seeks to reimpose. Specifically, the governor just issued an executive order that ignores the unrebutted factual record in this case and instead seeks to reimpose a wholly ineffective suffocation device mandate on the basis of repealed statutory authority. Were he still operating in a vacuum, or even with the former version of KRS Chapter 39A that existed a year ago, he might be entitled to a great degree of deference in that regard. But as noted, much has changed since the spring of 2020, including any alleged authority the governor cites for his proposed reimposition of suffocation device mandate. The court in Bashar versus Akri clearly stated its understanding that legislative power is the authority under... Quit it, dog. Is the authority under the Constitution to make the laws and to alter and repeal them. Bashar versus Bevin. This court held... Now the dogs want to fight. It's two dogs. It's Chris versus Governor. Okay. This court held that it was in part those legislative checks on the governor's use of emergency powers which prevented a violation of Section 27 and Section 28 of the Kentucky Constitution, which states, while the authority exercised by the governor in accordance with KRS Chapter 39A is necessarily broad, the checks on that authority are the same as those identified in Chief Justice McCormack's dissenting opinion. Okay, now B wants to attack me. Okay. Judicial challenges to the existence of an emergency or to the content of a particular order or regulation, legislative amendments or revocation of the emergency powers granted the governor, and finally, the ultimate check of citizens holding the governor accountable at the ballot box. Okay. Moving forward from a Cree legislative alteration amendment, and in some cases revocation occurred. It occurred in Senate Bill 1 at Section 2, which states in relevant part, executive orders, administrative regulations, or other directives issued under this chapter by the governor shall be in effect no longer than 30 days unless an extension, modification, or termination is approved by the General Assembly prior to the extension of any executive order or directive that 1. Places restrictions on the in-person meeting or places restrictions on the functioning, what the heck, of the following: A, elementary, secondary, or post-secondary educational institutions; B, private businesses or nonprofit organizations; C, political, religious, or social gatherings; D, places of worship; or E, local governments; or 2, imposes mandatory quarantine or isolation requirements. 3, upon the expiration of an executive order or other directive described in subsection 2A of this section declaring an emergency or other implementation of powers under this chapter, the governor shall not declare a new emergency or continue to implement any of the powers enumerated in this chapter based upon the same or substantially similar facts and circumstances as the original declaration or implementations without the prior approval of the General Assembly. 4. The General Assembly, by joint resolution, may terminate a declaration of emergency at any time. Legislative alteration, amendment, and in some cases revocation also occurred in House Bill 1, which states in relevant part, Section 1, notwithstanding any state law, administrative regulation, executive order, or executive directive to the contrary, during the current state of emergency declared by the governor in response to COVID-19 or any future state of emergency related to any invisible enemy, including but not limited to any mutated strain of the cooties, until January 31st, 2022. 1. Any business, for-profit, not-for-profit organization, local government, association, or any school, school district, public, private, religiously affiliated may remain open and fully operational for in-person services so long as it adopts an operating plan. This is the bad part of this bill. That meets or exceeds all applicable guidance issued by the CDC and prevention. Oh, oopsie, was I supposed to say that? Okay, whatever. Or by the executive branch, whichever is least restrictive. I don't understand how that point really works for us, but okay. 2 details how the business, for-profit, not-for-profit organization, local government, association, school, school district, public, private, religiously affiliated will foster the safety of employees, customers, attendees, and patrons, including social distance requirements. And 3 is posted in a conspicuous place on the main entrance door of the physical location of the business, for-profit, and blah, blah, blah. It's going to say the same thing all over again. No state or local agency shall enforce restrictions related to the state of emergency impacting the ability of the entities listed in the subsection to remain open and fully operational for in-person services and that exceed current applicable guidelines issued by the executive branch or the executive branch, whichever is least restrictive. The General Assembly also enacted 21 House Joint Resolution 77, which in relevant part stated, Section 1, all cootie-related executive orders, admin regulations, directive issued by the governor or pursuant to his authority, or agencies or boards under the governor's authority, not specifically extended by this act, are of no further force or effect as of the effective date of this act. Section 2, the General Assembly hereby approves and ratifies the following executive actions and administrative regulations issued in response to the cooties and declared that the same shall expire 90 days from the effective date of this act. Section 5, upon the expiration of executive action, other directives, or admin regulations declaring an emergency or other implementation of powers under KRS Chapter 39A, the governor shall not declare a new emergency or continue to implement any of the powers under KRS 39 based upon the same or substantially similar facts and circumstances as the original declaration or implementation without the prior approval of General Assembly. The court in a decree further clarified that the duration of the state of emergency, at least the one at issue in this case, is also limited by the aforementioned 2020 Senate Bill 150, Section 3, which requires the governor to state when the emergency has ceased, but in any event allows the General Assembly to make the determination itself if the governor has not declared an end to the emergency before the first day of the next regular session of the General Assembly. Now that is precisely what the General Assembly has done. Then the General Assembly enacted House Bill 192, the Budget Bill, which provides at Parts 3, pages 172 to 173 as follows. Executive orders. Notwithstanding any statute or common law to the contrary, and except as provided in this act, no state funds or state employee time shall be expended by any person or agency to implement or enforce any executive order issued other than as authorized by KRS 39A through 39F, as amended by 2021 regular session SB 1 and further amended by subsequent acts of the 2021 General Assembly, or other than as may be implemented or enforced for a total sum not exceeding $10,000 inclusive of all state employee time and costs, or other than as may relate to an emergency order issued relative to a natural disaster, or other than as may be approved by the General Assembly. Further, the purpose of ensuring transparent government, each and every executive order issued, whether or not subject to the aforesaid restrictions, shall provide simultaneously to the Legislative Research Commission the following items in comprehensive report as a condition precedent for the expenditure of any state funds or use of any state employee time. 1. A complete statement of each essential fact upon which the order is based. 2. A complete statement of each goal and goal sought through issuance of the order. 3. A comprehensive analysis explaining how the executive order achieves each stated goal with the least burden placed upon constitutional rights of the citizens of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and how each state goal is accomplished with the most efficient use of taxpayer money. Each comprehensive report shall be updated every 30 days subsequent to an issuance of executive order and provided to the Legislative Research Commission. Jesus. Sorry, guys. A wasp now. Let's see here. Ultimately, the General Assembly utilized the power of the purse and defunded all Cootie 19 enforcement. Then there was the aforementioned trial, and the circuit court entered an injunction that stated, "It is further hereby ordered that defendants, Honorable Andrew Bashar as governor, Mr. Eric Freelander, acting secretary, Dr. Stephen Stack, are enjoined from issuing or enforcing against any person within this Commonwealth an emergency order, emergency decree, or emergency regulation to the extent that the same are in conflict with or otherwise contrary to House Bill 1, Senate Bill 1, Senate Bill 2, and House Joint Resolution 77 as passed in the 2021 session of the General Assembly. For purposes of clarity, this injunction shall be applicable to defendants, their officers, agents, and attorneys, and upon other persons in active concert with them who receive actual notice of this order by personal service or otherwise. No doubt the governor thinks the General Assembly was wrong-headed in these measures it took in 2021. However, and rather than comply with those valid legislative enactments, he has taken a path of defiance, even going so far as to flout a lawful court order." Alright, guys, that dog did not want to stop barking. Okay. Perhaps the governor's views about proper Cootie 19 response are shared by certain segments of the public or even certain members of this court. But in a constitutional republic, shaping public policy is about exclusive domain of the General Assembly, and the establishment of public policy is granted to the legislature alone. It is beyond the power of a court to vitiate. I never heard that word before. An act of the legislature on the grounds that public policy promulgated therein is contrary to what the court or the governor and his appointees considers to be in the public interest. Okay. The governor's arguments are not new. As here, the governor claimed that an emergency gave rise to the need to take action. However, this court was clear: we reject the proposition that a governor can unilaterally declare an emergency and do what he wishes to resolve it. The opinion in Fletcher was also clear that it was constitutionally intolerable to refuse to follow the law simply because an emergency existed that necessitated it. Okay, I'll skip that. Ultimately, the opinion in Fletcher stands for the proposition that the governor possesses no emergency or inherent powers to take action not authorized by the General Assembly. But that is precisely what the governor seeks with his latest motion. He seeks this court's blessing of a statewide executive order issued in direct defiance of a lawful injunction, which itself upholds laws duly enacted by legislative supermajorities. Yes, the other invisible enemy variant is real. Okay. Yes, cases are on the rise. Yes, this may be a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, but necessity knows no law. Is nothing more than a repudiation of our Republican form of government. Repudiation, excuse me. There is, of course, a constitutional solution, one the governor consistently fails to mention, that almost as much as anything else is the most frustrating aspect of Movent's repeated requests to this court for a stay or supplemental authority, which is really a third request for stay. It is well past the time for the governor to engage the General Assembly and make his case there. True, he might not get everything he wants from the people's representatives, but that is what our Republican form of government requires. What the governor actually supplements here is further clear and unambiguous proof that he will not be constrained by lawful legislative enactments or apparently lawful court orders. That is a terrifying prospect in a constitutional republic. To the extent this court views his motion as a third request for a stay, as we do, his motion should be denied. Okay. I was just a little concerned about the part that talked about that people can stay open as long as they meet the applicable guidance issued by the agency in Georgia. I don't know about that because I don't know how does that support his argument. But I guess either way, he has to consult with the legislature because he can't do the same thing over again. What did you guys get from that? Well, if you stayed and listened, props to you. It's not easy reading these type of documents. All right, everyone, take care.